But I really do think it kind of just comes down to, like you just said, embracing yourself, embracing your strengths, and also finding ways to kind of pave a path in life that's going to really support those strengths and those natural tendencies that you have. And I think that's something that is really possible for most people. There's always going to be external circumstances outside of our control, but maybe there's small ways within your life that you can carve a little bit more time for yourself.
Hello, and welcome to the Quiet and Strong podcast, especially for introverts. I'm your host, David Hall, and the creator of quietandstrong.com. This is a weekly podcast dedicated to understanding the strengths and needs of introverts. Introversion is not something to fix, but to be embraced. Normally, we'll air each episode on a Monday. Be sure to subscribe on your favorite platform. Leave a review, tell a friend, help get the word out there. Megan Malone is a career coach and marketing consultant. She is passionate about helping people improve their relationships, career, and quality of life through coaching and tools like personality type. Megan is a certified coach and currently pursuing a master's degree in organizational development. She is a certified profiler in the Myers-Briggs personality system. She currently lives in Fort Worth, Texas, with her husband and 2 pups.
All right. Welcome to the Quiet and Strong podcast, Megan. So glad to have you on the
Hey,
show today.
yes, thank you for having me.
All right.
Excited to be here.
We're going to talk about the strengths and needs of introverts. Megan, I was letting you know that I've been reading your blogs and articles for a lot of years now, and I just thought it'd be great to have you on the show and talk about introversion.
Yeah, thank you. Well, this is something that I always enjoy talking about. So,
All right. And before we get started on that, just tell us a little bit about yourself and your journey to understanding that you were an introvert and starting to write about introversion and now coaching.
yeah. So when I was younger, I was definitely always shy, and had some social anxiety as a child, as a teenager. But I also really enjoyed people, and I thought of myself as a people person. I was very friendly. I enjoy building like strong connections with people. Um, but I didn't really understand what being an introvert was until I was in college. So I kind of had this disconnect in that I, on one hand, I was a little bit shy. On the other hand, I wanted to be friends with everyone. I wanted to like make connections. And then on the other hand, I was just constantly getting like burned out and having more anxiety because I didn't know I needed like this extra space for myself. Up until I was in a college psychology class and I took the Myers-Briggs personality assessment. And that was the first time I realized that I was actually an introvert. I was probably like 20, 21 at the time. And it was just such a like major aha for me because suddenly it was like, this is why I get so tired and have so much anxiety when I'm like spending an entire weekend going to parties, instead of taking some time for myself. I couldn't understand why I was struggling so much with that kind of stuff when a lot of other people I was around just seemed to be thriving, in the college experience of going out and partying and doing stuff all the time. And I thought there was something wrong with me that I was not able to do that without feeling so drained. So realizing that I was an introvert was a really kind of relieving experience because then I realized, oh, I'm pushing myself so hard to try to be like other people, and I'm not setting any boundaries. I'm not giving myself any alone time. It's no wonder that I have anxiety and I feel so drained and burned out. So that was kind of the beginning of this journey, which has been, it's like a kind of a lifelong self-awareness journey. That was really the beginning of it, in my early 20s. And since then, it's been a lot of continued growth and learning. I think that thing I said about boundary setting has been a big lesson, like learning how to step back and give myself the time that I need while still maintaining my relationships. And yeah, I guess It was probably a couple of years ago that I was working in marketing and I had a job that was, even though I was an introvert at the time, I had a job that didn't really allow for a lot of kind of personal or alone time. I was in a lot of meetings. I had a lot of clients that I managed, so a lot of meetings and calls every day, and it was really starting to burn me out and giving me again a lot of that anxiety because I didn't have a lot of balance. And so it was, I guess, 2019 that I decided to quit my job because I really just needed something that was more fulfilling for me and allowed me more freedom and flexibility. And so I quit my job. I ended up starting my own business, and then eventually decided to go back to school and to get this coaching certification and become a coach because I kind of had this realization that I do really enjoy working with people and especially working with people one on one and helping people. I always loved anything that I could do in my job that was like training or like supporting people or mentoring. So I knew I really wanted to focus on that, but I also knew that it would give me more flexibility. I wouldn't be working I was working for an ad agency at the time. I wouldn't be working for an agency or necessarily a corporation, but I could kind of work for myself while also helping to support other people. And so that's kind of where I guess life has taken me up until this point and kind of how my introversion has played a role. It's really been about developing or creating my lifestyle around my personality preferences and like making a lifestyle that's the right fit for me versus trying to fit in all these environments that just weren't right for me.
Okay. Yeah, we're going to have a great conversation today because so was it part of a college class or was just something you found online, the Myers-Briggs?
I actually studied psychology
Okay.
in college. I studied communications and psychology. And so it was a psychology class in college was the
Okay.
first time that I took the test. Yeah.
Okay. And then we're definitely going to get into this, and we're going to get into that you're now a certified profiler for the Myers-Briggs or the Myers-Briggs type indicator, also called MBTI. We're going to get into all that. But
Mhm.
what are the things as you're talking? There's certain strengths that you have as an introvert. That's what this show's all about, strengths, but there's also needs, and you were starting to talk about those. And then we'll also talk about some strategies for success. So what were some things that maybe that first, and then of course you've done a lot of work, self-awareness work since then. What
Mhm.
are some things that really stood out? Hey, you know what? I'm really good at this. What were some strengths that stood out as you were discovering that you were an introvert?
Yeah, great question. One strength I think is listening. Being someone who's an active listener and tries to really kind of focus on the person I'm talking with. And also really paying attention to other people's needs, and I think that was one thing that attracted me kind of to more of a mentorship or coaching role. Even in past work, I was really attuned to what other people's challenges that they were having and how I could help support that, and really listening to them and helping guide them based on what they needed was something that just came naturally to me. I think another strength would be kind of thoughtfulness, just making sure I'm thinking thoroughly about something, and really focusing on the depth over the breadth, which is something that I value in the work that I produce, regardless of what it is making sure that it's quality, making sure that I'm really going into depth on a subject. I also am a writer as well. And so that's kind of something that I value in my writing. I want it to be something that is high quality. I don't want to just produce a bunch of stuff just to be producing a bunch of stuff. So I would say that would be another. Not that that's only introverts can be good at that, but I do think that's kind of linked to this introverted tendency to really go inward and really kind of look at something very thoroughly.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that inward part, that's what's common to all of us. That's where we spend
Mhm.
more of our time, being introspective, being in our inner world of ideas. And
Right.
there's some other things that may be more common to your personality type. And we're definitely going to get into that. because, you and I will both say, yeah, we're not all the same as introverts. There's
Right.
definitely things that we all have in common, but then there's different ways that, we're definitely different. And it's good. We need everybody, right?
Yes, for sure.
What did you discover, like you were talking about, that you found out that, you needed maybe some time to recharge? What were some needs that you figured out, that you weren't experiencing when you first started college, that you know what, I really got to do this for myself?
Oh gosh. I don't know that I noticed the actual needs as much as I noticed my reaction to not paying attention to those needs.
Yeah.
So kind of falling into I don't know that it was depression, but it was definitely anxiety, and just not feeling like myself, like feeling like something was off and not really being able to identify what it was. Feeling like I wasn't as in touch like with my emotions as I normally am. Probably because I wasn't having as much time to pay attention to them or pay attention to what like was going on, within me. Um, so it was really kind of just noticing some of the symptoms, of not paying attention to my own needs happening first and being like, what is going on? What is wrong with me? Um, and then when I learned about introversion, it was like, oh, I think this has something to do with it. This is why maybe this is causing some of these issues that I'm having. And to that point, when I started kind of slowly addressing them over time, I started to realize that things were getting better. So
Yeah. Yeah. And it's that we're going to talk about some myths too, but we do need some time alone. Not all day. I think
mhm,
that would drive most of us pretty crazy,
yeah.
but we need some time to think, to feel that inner world. We need to spend some time there. And I think that's what really causes problems, is when we're not spending enough time there that we need to, to
Mhm,
either recharge or just to think, to dream, to make some plans. We need to spend some time there. And if you don't
mhm,
understand that, all those things can happen, and
yeah.
if you're not in alignment with who you are, then you can be depressed or have anxiety. And I'm
Yeah.
not saying that, introversion is the cause of those things, but if you're not
Mhm.
understanding yourself, that could be an outcome of that.
Yeah, I think it's anytime you're in a situation where you're not really listening to your needs, whether it's because you're an introvert or maybe you're an extrovert in a situation where you're not able to really listen to, you never really there's a lot of different factors that could cause it, but I think it's just not being aware, not having that kind of sense of self-awareness, and then or maybe having that self-awareness but not doing anything about it, not doing anything to change the environment, to better support you if you can or as much as possible. And to your point earlier, like you said, nobody needs to be, just totally alone. I think when I first learned I was introversion, I almost did like a complete 180 and was like, well, now I'm an introvert. I'm just going to like not do anything because I need to be alone all the time, which
Yeah.
was a mistake also, like I realized, wait, no, I need balance. I need to kind of figure out how to balance that effectively.
Yeah, I think that's the key, is balance. It's
Mhm.
figuring out, what kind of time do I need? What's important to me, what's important to the other people in my life,
Right.
and have some kind of proper balance. And I've probably said on a lot of these shows, I think the pandemic really pointed that out to a lot of people. It's like, okay,
Yeah.
now I'm at home. I'm working at home, which I hadn't done before. I'm with
Mhm.
my wife that always has worked from home. So now I'm and she's a fellow introvert. I'm in her
Mhm.
space now. We have 3 kids. 2 of them are in online school and not very happy about it. And, it was a crazy time. And I had different, different interruptions at home than I did at work, but, still. And there
Yeah.
was times where I definitely felt isolated from the other people in my life, and
Mhm.
so definitely can be a myth. Or,
Mhm.
people would say, oh yeah, introverts, they're loving this, being home all the time. And I definitely know some people that were feeling very isolated, that
Mhm.
they didn't have the connection that they needed, and it was rough. And so
Right. Yeah.
that's the thing. There's not one way, but what works for you, and what works for you and the other people in your life, kind of thing.
Yeah. Absolutely. And that's true. I think the pandemic did kind of reveal a lot of things that people didn't know about themselves. And I think in some ways that's generated more interest in kind of self-awareness and growth and understanding psychology, personality, which is a good thing, and hopefully it's giving more people, access and information to tools and resources that they need.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I was telling you before the show, that's kind of why I started the podcast, because there was just so many misconceptions going around, especially during the pandemic. I'm like, yeah, we got to talk about these things more.
Yeah, for
Um,
sure.
what's a couple myths you want to bust today about introversion? I think we already busted a
Yeah,
couple, but
sure. I think one big myth, and I know I mentioned earlier when I was a kid, I was fairly shy. One big myth though about introverts is that introversion is the same thing as shyness, or all introverts are shy. That one I think is probably my biggest pet peeve because I hear it the most. And as someone who used to be very shy, I feel like I very easily can distinguish the difference between what is an introverted trait and what is like a trait of shyness. I would no longer identify as someone who is shy, because I have done kind of a lot of work to deal with that, to be, less fearful of social interactions and stuff, and gain more confidence over time. So I think it's important to know the difference between what it means to be an introvert and what it means to be shy or to have social anxiety, because they are different things. And as we know, extroverts can be shy or have social anxiety. It's not something that's just solely introverted. So I think there's that one. I think,
let's stop right there for just a
oh,
second.
okay, sure.
So you used to be shy, right?
Yeah.
I would describe myself the same way, used to be
Mhm.
shy, but we're
Yeah.
still introverts, right?
Yes, exactly.
And we always
Yeah.
will be.
Yeah.
So, what were some things that helped you overcome your shyness and social anxiety?
For me, I guess it's twofold. I think one is just kind of learning more about my innate personality. I think part of it was feeling, maybe like feeling different from other people made me shy. Like if I opened up too much about who I was, like people wouldn't like me. So kind of learning to accept myself for who I was by understanding my personality was one thing that gave me more confidence. And I think confidence is a big part of overcoming shyness. Um, and then the second part is the action, kind of challenging myself to do things that would be outside of my comfort zone. Um, and, challenging myself to be in situations that would be uncomfortable, like leading a meeting, or, and I would did this even as early as like high school and stuff. Like I was involved in theater, and it wasn't necessarily super comfortable for me. I enjoyed it. I had friends that were in it and stuff, and it was a situation where I could kind of be outside of my comfort zone in a way that was a little bit manageable. And then as I've gotten older, just continuing to do that through work and just life events and stuff, like I never want to say, no, I'm not going to do something because I have a little bit of anxiety over it, like if it's something that I feel like is good for me to do, or the right thing for me to do, or what I want to do, just because I feel a little bit scared or anxious, like that's not a reason not to do something as far as I'm concerned. So just continuing to just let myself be uncomfortable. And, over time, you do develop that confidence in yourself. You realize, oh, actually, I can do this. Like I can, make a video or be on a podcast or lead a meeting or do these things that maybe sounded much scarier 10 or 15 years ago.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that was for me too, is the self-awareness really helped me overcome my shyness, because it's like, yeah,
Yeah.
you know what? I think before I speak. Not everybody does that, but it's normal
Right.
for me. It comes with strength for me.
Hmm.
I am going to be quiet sometimes because I'm thinking, it's not because I'm shy. And
Hmm.
I do need some time alone. And all these things really helped me realize, hey, you know what? You have some strengths. And I hope everybody out there is hearing, hey, you have some strengths. It's not, it's a good thing. And, you don't have to be shy. And as you're saying, as you start to do things, it's like you stop having to get out of your comfort zone because it's now comfortable for you, because you're confident. You realize I have something to say. I should be on a podcast. This shouldn't make me nervous because
Right.
I have some great things to say. I might need to prepare a little bit for it, but that's fine. It's one of my introverted gifts of preparation. So that's a big thing. If you are shy as an introvert, you don't have to, in my mind, becoming self-aware might be a lot of the cure for that.
Absolutely. And I do think, we can kind of feel sometimes that like the loudest person in the room or the most charismatic, confident person in the room is the person who should be in charge or the person we should listen to. Um, but I think for introverts, you kind of start to realize over time, the more you just get comfortable with doing things, that like persistence pays off, like people start recognizing your strengths. Maybe they don't recognize them right away because you're not the loudest person and they're paying attention to that person in the beginning. But eventually, they start to realize it. And that's going to pay off for you if you just continue to be yourself and to lean into your strengths.
Yeah, lean into your strengths and they will get recognized.
Yeah.
And sometimes I think you always got to work hard too. Work hard and lean into your strengths and your voice
Yeah.
will be heard. That's part of it. It might take some time, but
Yeah.
it will happen. Okay, so um, you are a certified Myers-Briggs coach or profiler, and tell us. I've talked a little bit about it on the show. Tell us a little bit more about what is the Myers-Briggs.
Sure. So the Myers-Briggs is a system of personality type. It's got 16 different personality types. And it really breaks the personalities into 4 different categories. So we have introvert and extrovert being one category where you fall on that spectrum. And then we've got intuition and sensation, where you kind of fall there, which is intuition is kind of a focus on concept, ideas, what if possibilities, and sensations more focused on the concrete, the details, day to day, what's happening in the immediate environment. And then the next category is thinking and feeling, how you make decisions. Thinking is very much logical, rational, objective, focused on kind of the details and the facts basically. And feeling is more emotional, so it's going to be more in tune with your feelings or other people's feelings. And then the last category is judging versus perceiving. Judging being more focused on kind of structure and order, and perceiving being a little bit more open and flexible. So depending on where you fall on, I think of all of them as spectrums, because you can be, slightly more extroverted or you can be very extroverted, depending on, where you're at in life and your experiences and your innate personality, all these different things. So depending on where you fall, you will have a 4-letter type that will be like, for example, like INFJ or ESTP. And it will encompass all 4 of these categories. So within the Myers-Briggs system, there's 8 different types of introverts. And I think it's a really helpful system as an introvert to kind of get to know yourself better, because it does show that not all introverts are the same. It's not like introvert is just one personality category and all introverts have the same characteristics. It kind of shows how there's these different flavors of introverted. So you might be like a feeling introvert, like I am. And that kind of explains why I did think of myself as a people person, and while I really liked making connections with people and spending time with people, but yet was also an introvert. Or you may be a thinking introvert. You might be a intuitive introvert or a sensing introvert. There's just all these different types that you can be. So it just kind of goes a step deeper than like just understanding, hey, I'm an introvert, but like what does my flavor of introvert look like? And it also looks at these other parts of your personality, like how you make decisions, how you see the world, that aren't really covered within just the introvert umbrella.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that, because sometimes it's just like, all right, introverts, we're all this way. And
Right.
it's not true, especially if half of us are introverts and half are extroverts. You can't stereotype half the population that we're all one way, right? And I think it really gets at some of the differences. I mean, I'll say that, nobody is exactly the same. We're all different. We all have different nuances. We're complicated people, right? But
Mhm.
I think it really helps show some differences between types and also some gifts and strengths,
Mhm.
and you can really come up with some strategies for yourself, for success, by understanding your type. Um,
Mhm.
how do you use it in the coaching work that you do?
Well, I think that a tool like Myers-Briggs is really useful in coaching, just to kind of start at that level of self-awareness, especially if someone has never done any kind of personality assessment or hasn't really spent a lot of time. They're not going to really understand kind of the root or the source of maybe a lot of the challenges they're having. For example, like at work, maybe they're having communication challenges with their boss or other employees, and they're not going to, you know, understand kind of why that is. So using a tool like the Myers-Briggs, for example, kind of help them be like, oh, okay, maybe I'm having these challenges because like I'm a thinker and I just want to be straight to the point, and my coworker is a feeler and they need more of that kind of connection. And so they're getting, frustrated with me because I'm not providing that. And there's just so much that this kind of stuff can help with, in the workplace and relationships, all kinds of things. And so in coaching, I kind of like to use it up front if that's something people are interested in. Like, let's start with this so that both of us, me as your coach and you as the individual, have more awareness and insight into your personality. And then when we're talking about some of these issues we're having, we can kind of see if there's parts, like maybe some of these like sources are actually rooted into the ways you're similar or different from other people, or why you're
Yeah,
having certain struggles, at work.
right. So I think you already said that you're an INFJ. I know you've written a lot about that. You've even wrote a book
Mhm.
about that.
Mhm.
I'm similar. We have three of the same letters. I'm a INTJ. So,
Mhm.
definitely introverted, intuitive. That's a really important part of my personality. Um,
Mhm.
Thinking versus feeling, and I definitely want to talk about that. And then
Right.
I'm definitely more structured and planned, and I'll talk about that too. But so what, like, just say an INFJ and an INTJ are working together. What would be some good things to know about each other, and things to watch out for so they're maybe not conflict?
Yeah. So, like you said, an INFJ and an INTJ are going to share many similarities, because they are both introverts. They're both intuitives. They both use the same type of intuition, which I won't get into that too much on there because that goes
Next
very,
next show.
yeah. um, but they're very similar, except for that thinking and feeling dichotomy, right? And so both of these types are going to be very future oriented and goal oriented. They're going to be planners. They're going to be, need more alone time. They're not going to be wanting to just constantly collaborate with each other and bounce ideas off each other 24/7. A little bit of that. They're probably going to enjoy conversations because they are similarly minded. Um, but the thinking and feeling difference is probably where the challenges are going to come in. INTJs and oftentimes thinkers in general can be very direct, and to the point in communication. And so that could be a challenge for the feeler who maybe is like, oh, are they mad at me? Like, why, if they're reading into it that way, they're kind of looking at it more from the emotional standpoint. Um, they might not have as much like emotional and relational kind of language. And for the thinker, they could maybe be frustrated that the feeler is thinking like, well, we need to consider, all these people that are potentially, going to be affected. And the thinker might be like, well, that's like a hurdle that we don't want to like deal with right now. We don't need to deal with it. And the feeler's going to be like, yes, we do need to deal with it. So it's really that kind of dynamic that I think might cause challenges. I haven't had a lot of bad experiences working with thinkers, really. I think most people try to be at least somewhat self aware and understanding of different, how people are different, and especially in the workplace. But that does come up, sometimes. And with people that I coach too, it really comes up in communication struggles, between thinkers and feelers, just not kind of getting, they're just not intuitively going to understand why there's this clash, because what seems so natural for them is just totally foreign to the other person.
Yeah. And on both sides, it seems natural.
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
So I definitely believe that we can, work together well as we understand things. But also, I think it's important that I might acknowledge that you have some gifts that I don't, or you
Right.
acknowledge that I have some gifts that you don't. And how
Right.
can you see that as a benefit? Like maybe there's something I can partner with where you're bringing some skills that I just don't have, and vice versa.
Yeah, definitely. I mentioned balance earlier as something that's so important for us as individuals, right? Like we don't ever want to be too extreme introvert or extreme extrovert, because finding that balance even within ourselves is really going to help us be more well-rounded and developed, um, and just kind of work better in in the world that we all live in, different types of people. And I think balance in relationships is important too, kind of that give and take, like realizing, hey, you are different than me, but you also have these strengths that I can learn from, or that I can kind of maybe just accept and celebrate in you as being different from me. Um, and I think when we do that, when you recognize that other people being different does not mean that that's a bad thing, or us being different is not a bad thing, but we both have strengths and we both have our own challenges, and if we just remain open to understanding other people, and um, not making assumptions is a big one. Like you don't know what someone's intent is or where someone's coming from. Just being open to who they are and accepting them for who they are. It sounds kind of cheesy, but like that's really kind of helps to have that kind of balance in the relationships, and know that frustrations will come up with people who are different from you. That's just normal. Conflict and challenges will come up, but I think if you again remain open and just willing to listen and understand where they're coming from, then you can kind of get through those things. So
Yeah, and I love you use the word celebrate in there, and I think that's what this is all about, is celebrating
yeah,
our gifts and strengths.
it
So
is. Yeah.
my wife and I, it's actually our anniversary. We've been married many years. She's my
Oh
best
wow.
friend. We get along very well.
Congratulations.
Yeah, and her letters we're also just one off, but ours are, she's an INTP.
Okay.
And so, as you described before, I'm probably more scheduled and she's probably more spontaneous. And I have to say nice things because she's also my editor too. So you know,
She's listening.
yeah, she's gonna listen. So anyway, I mean, one thing that I really realized, and we definitely, as I started blogging, and her and I started having more conversations. She's a fellow introvert, and
Mhm.
it was crazy because we'd been married a long time, again, happily married. But as we started really talking about this, we got to understand each other even that much better. Like, why is she staying up late? I get up early, she stays up late because we need a little bit of quiet time. Or why, when
Mhm.
I'm sitting really close to her and I'm trying to talk to her, she's not responding. It's because she's in her zone. She's thinking, and
Right.
these aren't bad things. Or why, again, I'm a little more scheduled and she's a little more spontaneous.
Mhm.
And if I wanted to change that about her, or if she wanted to change how I am, it wouldn't work very well and we wouldn't be as happy, because there
Yeah.
isn't changing it. It's really,
Exactly.
like you
Yeah.
said, celebrating. And I
Right.
think it's good because definitely I probably worry more than she does, and her spontaneity, and it brings some, it relieves some anxiety for me for sure.
Mhm.
And so I think that we're good for each other, but we have a lot of similarities, but there's some differences that we need to celebrate.
Yeah, for sure. I think again, like when it comes to our differences, like the less that we understand another person, the more we're going to make assumptions about them and say, well, she's not wanting to spend time with me, does she not like me, or like what is going on here? Like our brains can go to all kinds of places when we don't really understand something. I think that's important to remember, at all times in all situations, but especially with other people, if we don't understand who they are and where they're coming from, we can make up all sorts of things, and that can cause a lot of conflict, a lot of frustration, and you know personality type is such a helpful tool in relationships and marriages and stuff too, and partnerships because of that same reason, like all the stuff you're talking about with your wife. My husband's an extrovert, and so that we've had that kind of dynamic, and we've had to learn a lot about each other. And so, yeah, it's just really helpful in so many different ways for understanding.
Does
And
he
like you said,
understand
celebration.
does he understand when you need your alone time?
Oh, now he does for sure. We've been together for like 7, almost 8 years now. So now he does.
But that was something you had to work through?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
And I had to work through too. I had to learn how to kind of ask for that alone time or show that I needed that alone time in a way. Cause I
Yeah.
would feel bad in the beginning. I'd be like, oh, like I feel bad if I'm not spending time with him. And, um, we just had to learn how to have like those very open conversations and talk about it and realize, what we both needed. And now he'll mention it. He's like, he'll come in the room, watch TV. He's like, oh, are you having like me time or do you want to like watch a movie together? And he's totally open, whatever I say, I'll be like, oh no, let's watch a movie. He's like, okay, great. Or I'm like, yeah, actually I want to just, hang out by myself tonight. He's become very like understanding and accepting of kind of my preferences because now he understands it so well.
Yeah. And that is so wonderful. And it's like, I love you, but I also need this, and
Yeah.
this will actually help me be a better person for you if I have this little bit of
Right.
time that, so that's wonderful. And
Yeah.
that's what we need everybody to understand is what our needs are, um, at work, I might need a little space,
Mhm.
if I'm at work and I have a door, it's funny here, I don't have a door. At work, I do. I can't close my door at home, where I'm situated, but work, maybe I'll close my door for a bit because I just really need that time to concentrate,
Mhm.
or to recharge, or if I need to take a quick walk outside, it's just normal, just
Yeah.
to get some air and recharge. And that's what we need to kind of articulate to each other.
Yeah.
Anything else you want to say about the Myers-Briggs?
Oh my gosh. Well, I'm sure there's a lot that I could continue saying and talking about. I just think it's really useful. There's a lot of great personality tools out there. But Myers-Briggs to me, just because it does have all these different types of categories, it really allows for a little bit more deeper level of understanding. So yeah, I would say check it out if you haven't already. And yeah, I guess
I
that's about
think we
it.
gave some I think we gave some samples on 3 out of the 4. I don't think we talked about intuitive versus sensing. Um,
Okay. Yeah.
and again, sometimes when you're intuitive, you're just able to put things together.
Mhm.
And that can drive some people that are more sensing, that can drive them crazy, I've found. Have you found that?
Yes, I think that it can depend on what we're talking about, but when it comes to
Yes.
like patterns and ideas, yes. One thing that sensors will often do in like a workplace event, for example, if we're talking about like big picture, is they'll get very specific because they need to kind of talk through all of the details of this. And for intuitives, they're like, this is a waste of time. Why am I sitting here? Like, I already know what you're trying to explain. I know the overall concept. That's all I need to know. But sensors will want to get into the details and they'll want to kind of talk about the specifics. And that is all very important to them into kind of creating this big picture situation. And so that can kind of be a cause of conflict, I think, both in work and in relationships, just one person getting more into the details and one person wanting to just kind of be like, I got the overall idea. We're good. Like, I don't want to sit here and talk about all the specifics. And again, I think it comes down to realizing, there's a lot of value in looking at the details, looking at the data and the information in front of us and going over that and taking, these small steps to, achieve goals and all that kind of thing. And then there's value in just kind of focusing on the goal and the big picture and the brainstorming ideation stages and stuff like that too. So again, just like any other thing, it's just understanding the value in both and kind of trying to find that balance.
Yeah, absolutely. And definitely with the big picture for me, the
Mhm.
details, they just fall into place. But I have to remember,
Yeah.
who am I working with and what do they need from me? Maybe I do need to lay out the details that are naturally falling into place for me.
Mhm.
And also the person that's really detail oriented might really be, catching some great things and thinking
Mhm.
of some things that, need to be considered. So
Yeah.
everything that we're talking about, there's great strengths, and we just need to celebrate them together and also realize what we each need. What's your recommendation for people taking the Myers-Briggs?
Yeah. So, well, disclaimer, I work for
Okay.
Truity Psychometrics. So they have a version of the 16 personality. They don't call it the Myers-Briggs because there's
Okay.
just one Myers-Briggs actual official online test, which you can take. I
Right.
think it costs like $50 or something. Truity has a version called the Type Finder, which is really good. I like it because it goes really in depth into each of the categories. So, like if you score as an introvert, it actually will break down introversion into like 6 facets of introversion and show where you score, which makes it actually different than any other kind of Myers Briggs test that's out there. Um, so, that's a great place to start. There are some other free tests out there. That you can take. I've done some training with Personality Hacker. I think they have a free test on their website. So there's a lot of good places to start in terms of the test. But in terms of the paid test, I would definitely recommend Truity's. I think that their paid report is great. And then if you want to dive a little bit deeper, which a lot of people do when they first get their result, I mean, there's a lot of good information that you can find online, but also working with a certified profiler or a coach who has experience with personality type is another great way to dive even deeper into your type.
Yes. And I mean, I agree. I think the paid versions can definitely be better. I mean, there's a lot of free versions out there you can take. And I
Mhm.
also think it can be very helpful to work with someone who is expert that can help you understand so you don't have any misunderstandings as you're taking it on your own kind of thing.
Yeah,
I'm also a big fan. I've done workshops. I'm also a big
right.
fan of that where people are able to talk to each other about their strengths and needs and really sometimes see where you're the same, but also just see, oh yeah, they are different. I don't look at the world that way, and that's okay.
Yeah, workshops are great, especially for like teams, like work teams and stuff like that, to kind of understand, oh, here's why, we have these communication struggles within our team, stuff like that. You can really kind of understand all of that a lot more clearly.
Is there any other just general advice, understanding the different types at work?
Um, I think it's kind of an important thing just to remember with if you are having frustration with someone or your confusion with someone at work, whether it's a boss or someone who works under you or another peer, like maybe explore that a little bit, the personality stuff, and see if maybe that can answer some questions for you. I think, again, especially with communication, but also working styles and stuff. It might be, let's say your boss is like an ENTP or something, and they always want you to come in and they want to have these like 2 hour long brainstorming sessions with you. And you're like, I need to be, focusing on my work and getting all this stuff checked off. And that's, wasting my time. That person, that's a situation where personality can answer some questions for you. And then you have kind of this toolkit to be able to have a conversation with that other person and say, hey, I realize you need to have these brainstorm sessions. What if we make them more structured so I can plan out, each week an hour of time to do this, but then I can also make sure I have time to get everything else done on my checklist and it's not stressing me out. So um, you can kind of develop ways for everyone to kind of have a win-win from the situation so that you're not sacrificing your needs, but you're also not just being like, well, I'm not going to do what you want. You're minimizing the kind of conflict that you have in the workplace and just making it better for everybody.
Yeah, and that's a great example because I know for myself, I do benefit from group work, from group brainstorming, but
Mhm.
also please just acknowledge that I come up with some great ideas on my own. That's
Yeah.
really important to me. If you
Yeah.
think that we can only come up with ideas in a group session, I mean, that's part of my strength. I definitely thrive there, but I also thrive on my own, and just I need to be able to share that. Like, if I need to be able to have that space and also voice in some of my own ideas, as well as, doing the group work. I think they're both important, but we need to be
Mhm.
able to, have a language to express, here's where I work best and here's how we can work together best, as you're saying.
Yeah, I've definitely gotten good at using the phrase like, let me think on this and get back to you. Like when I'm in a situation where it seems like people want an immediate idea or response, I'm always like, I'm going to think about this and process a little bit and then I'll get back to you. And people usually respond well to that.
That is a saving phrase as an introvert. Let me think
Yeah.
about that. Whether it be for a minute or an hour
Yeah.
or the next day, that's just that saves us, because and we
Mhm.
need to, and as I've seen people grow in their, understanding their introversion, that's something I've watched people as they become more self-aware start to say things like that, because there's
Mhm.
so much pressure just to have this great idea on the spot. And sometimes we will. Sometimes
Yeah.
we will have great ideas on the spot. And I
Yeah.
always hate for people to think, oh, well, you always have to have time to think about it. Like, well,
Right. Yeah.
sometimes, sometimes.
No, yeah.
And sometimes I need to think about it. Sometimes I'm going to have a great idea on the spot. But
Mhm.
just to reserve that right and also express your need, I think that's a great phrase.
Yes, for sure.
Okay. Oh man, I could continue this conversation forever, Megan. This has been very
I
wonderful.
know.
Is there anything else about introversion and embracing your strengths and being confident as an introvert that we didn't cover?
I think that there's there's just so much, like you said, I could keep talking about this topic forever. But I really do think it kind of just comes down to, like you just said, embracing yourself, embracing your strengths, and also finding ways to kind of pave a path in life that's going to really support those strengths and those natural tendencies that you have. And I think that's something that is really possible for most people. There's always going to be external circumstances outside of our control, but maybe there's small ways within your life that you can carve a little bit more time for yourself, like, or there's certain maybe shifts you can make in your workplace so that your job is set up to be a little bit better fit for you than it is currently, so just looking for those even small ways to just slightly kind of develop this life that's more in line with who you are and your natural tendencies. And I think you'll notice kind of over time, the more you do that, the more your life does kind of seem to like honor your natural preferences and strengths. Um, I think sometimes people feel like, well, there's nothing I can do about the situation that I'm in, or I have to make this big, massive shift that's going to improve my life. Like you don't necessarily have to do that. That's not always possible for everybody. So just looking even for the small ways and just continuing to be focused on improving and growing into your strengths and accepting yourself and continuing to dive into personality and becoming more self-aware. That's always going to pay off, I think, in the end.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that you said, sometimes it can be a very gradual process, but
Right.
those little steps here and there, they add up.
For
And
sure.
you
Yes.
can design the life and work that works for you. And it may take some time. And
Mhm.
I also always say, nobody ever does everything. There's always things you're not going to want to do. But if you can
Right.
sometimes gradually, however it works out, come up with, most of the time you're doing work that you're working in your strengths. That's where we want to be. There's always going
Mhm.
to be something that we don't want to do, but that's part of life.
Right. Yep. Definitely.
All right. So Megan, if people want to find out more about the work you're doing and the coaching, where can they get a hold of you?
Yeah. So right now you can find me on social media. I've got an Instagram for my coaching. It's just Coach with Megan. I'm also on Twitter. I'm even on TikTok now. So
All right.
at Megan M as in Michelle, that's my middle name, Megan M Malone. Um, that's pretty much primarily where I'm at. I do a lot of writing. Like I said, I work for Truity, so I do a lot of content and writing for them. So you can definitely check them out. Um, yeah, I think those are kind of the main places where you can find me.
Very good.
And I do, like you said earlier, I have a book for INFJs, which you can get on Amazon. It's called The Complete Guide to Understanding the INFJ Personality Type, if you want to check that out.
Okay. And I will put all of that in the show notes. So thanks again, Megan. It's been a pleasure to have you on the show today.
Yeah, thank you. It's been great.
Thank you so much for joining me today. I look forward to further connecting with you. Reach out at David at quietandstrong.com. Check out the website, quietandstrong.com. I'll add social media channels for me and my guests to the show notes. Please comment on social media posts. Send me topics or guests you'd like to see on the show. There's so many great things about being an introvert, and so we need those to be understood. Get to know your introverted strengths and needs and be strong.